A history of the six duchies is of necessity a history of its ruling family, the Farseers. A complete telling would reach back beyond the founding of the first duchy, and if such names were remembered, would tell us of Outerslanders raiding from the sea, visiting as pirates a shore more temperate and gentler than the icy beaches of the Out Islands. But we do not know the names of these earliest forebears. And of the first real king, little more than his name and some extravagant legends remain. Taker, his name was, quite simply, and perhaps with that naming began the tradition that daughters and sons of his lineage would be given names that would shape their lives and beings. Passed through fire and plunged through salt water and offered to the winds of the air, thus were names sealed to these chosen children. So we are told. A pretty fancy, and perhaps once there was such a ritual, but history shows us this was not always sufficient to bind a child to the virtue that named it. Welcome back to Archer's World of Literature, guys. Today we're going to be doing, I think, my first fantasy review on this channel. And I know in my channel description and when I started this channel, it was going to be classics and fantasy. I was on a giant classics binge recently, and after finishing Ulysses by James Joyce, was brilliant, one of my favorite books of all time. I needed some fantasy. I needed some magic. I needed some coming of age. I needed some journeying. I needed some animal companions. I needed some sword fights, some mystery, and I needed some fantastical plot. And this book really satisfied that urge for me and that need to get back to something more magical, and that is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I've finally done it. I've dipped my toes into the realm of the Elderlings, and I'm so excited to continue to go through. Just this first book alone has just opened up a massive world with an incredible history, incredibly rich characters, and a very, very good plot. So today I'm going to be just going over what makes it good, what things I didn't like, the general plot, and my future plans for the rest of the realm of the Elderlings. So sit down. This is going to be spoiler-free. This is just going to be my general thoughts on what the book is about and what I liked about it. So let's do it. So we're going to start off with what this book is about. And so, Assassin's Apprentice follows the character Fitz. Fitz is a bastard, and he's dropped off at the front gates of the helm of Bucktown when he is about 6 years old. He's dropped off by his grandfather, who claims that he is the son of Prince Chivalry, and that he is a royal bastard. So Fitz is dropped off at Bucktown, and we see him grow up as a stable boy, and he is raised by Chivalry's right-hand man, Burek. And so Burek basically sort of raises Fitz when Chivalry is sort of shamed into abdication and goes off to another land and gives up his position as king in waiting because he's too shamed by having a bastard that wasn't with his queen-to-be. There have been rumours that his queen-to-be is not capable of bearing a child. There have been rumours that he is not able to provide a child. And so he has some sort of mixed emotions when he finds out he's got a bastard. He knows that he is capable of having a child, but rumours spread through the kingdom that sort of promote that his wife is not able to have one because Fitz was born to a mother unknown, someone that is outside of the royal family, someone that is outside of Bucktown itself. It's not actually really described who that lady is, but I think that we might get more of that towards the other books of the Farseer trilogy. So Fitz is raised from about 6 years old. He's sort of facing some peril because people don't like him because of the fact that his existence shamed Prince Chivalry into abdication. And because of that, now there is a big plot between the other princes, so Chivalry's two brothers, Prince Regal and Prince Verity. And so now they are fighting for the position of who is going to be the next king in waiting, since Chivalry has left. Regal despises Fitz. However, Verity looks at Fitz with love, with a bit of caring. He actually shows some real fatherly qualities towards Fitz. And so As Fitz is being raised in the stables with Burich, we learn that he actually has an innate ability called the wit. So wit is one of the magic systems in this book, and the wit is an ability to talk to animals sort of mentally. So he's sort of got this telekinesis where he can connect with all sorts of animals, and this is shown with one of the dogs that Burich gives him to look after. Because he's sleeping in the stables, he's sleeping with the hounds, the castle's hounds, because not only is Burich stable master, he's also like keeper of the hounds, master of the hounds and the grounds. And eventually Burich can sense that Fitz is having this bond with this dog, and he's aware of what the wit is, and he sort of gets upset at Fitz for doing this, and he warns Fitz of what it actually means. He warns that if men get too close to the wit, it turns them into the beasts themselves. And so he gets rid of the dog. So the dog's name is Nosy, and so Burich gets rid of him. Fitz thinks he's killed him, and so that sort of, we're not really told, at the start, we're not told whether he did kill the dog, so that sort of makes him seem like a bit of a bad guy, but we're also not told if he didn't just send him away, so we don't actually know at the start of the book. Going through the ages, we have this really good coming-of-age story. Fitz grows up, and eventually, as sort of the turmoil around what his position is going to be within the kingdom, whether he's going to be part of the royal family or not, because he still has this bastard title, we see the king. So King Shrewd is currently the king, and as he's getting older, that's why there's discussion of who's the king in waiting. King Shrewd's sons are Chivalry, Verity, and Regal. So King Shrewd actually sort of looks to Fitz with sort of going, well, he can be a bit of a help to us. He can do something for the kingdom. As a bastard, we could actually probably risk his life more because he's not as important. And so we get this huge tale of Fitz being quite alone in the world, because while he does have companions and people he talks to, because of his bastard status, they are... they're more likely to mistreat him or not treat him as well, put him in more dangerous situations. And so King Shrewd actually approaches Fitz through Chade. So Chade is this man who has a room above Fitz's room in Bucktown, in the keep. And Chade turns out to be an assassin. And so Chade essentially starts training Fitz to be an assassin, and he tells him of herbs, he tells him of how to kill a man slowly, quickly, how to sneak, how to gain information, and all of that. And so Chade actually tells Fitz that King Shrewd gave Chade this mission to train Fitz as an assassin for the kingdom. And so Fitz slowly starts, over the next few years, he slowly starts learning how to be an assassin and how to be a king's man, how to learn what he can do to help defend the kingdom. Now, the realm of the duchies is not completely safe. We have Fitz learning how to be an assassin, but during this we have the growing prevalence of the Red Ship Raiders, and so they are coming from the Outer Lands, which are sort of this faraway land that has been sort of they've sort of been outgrown by the Six Duchies. The Six Duchies have become more modernized and more advanced civilizations, and so the Outer Landers have sort of been left across the sea as sort of this unknown, sort of less civilized people. Now, the Red Ship Raiders are known for their fear-mongering and their abilities to come into the Six Duchies and the towns on the beach and the coastal towns and raid and pillage and take and kill. And one day they actually, a story comes across of them raiding the town of Forge. So the Red Ship Raiders, they take a bunch of hostages from the town of Forge, and they actually say, you can pay us and we'll kill them. And if you don't pay us, we're going to bring them back a little bit different. We'll bring them back to you, but they'll be different. And so the town of Forge doesn't pay them. And the Red Ship Raiders, they follow through with their promise, and they bring back these people, but they're different. They come back and they've lost all their human qualities. They come back sort of in this zombified state. They come back and they don't care for material possessions anymore. They don't care for family. All they care about is food. So they just care about food. They don't have any manners anymore. They start stealing from their own family. They just have zero sense of their previous lives and what it means to be a human and a functioning citizen in the town. And so eventually they're causing havoc And so all of the people from Forge, the people who haven't been turned into this sort of zombified state, they leave. And so the town is actually run by these people that have been affected by whatever the Red Ship Raiders have done. We don't know what it is at the moment. And so they have just sort of ransacked the town, and they're just living there. And eventually they sort of move on because they've eaten all the food there, and they've driven out all the people. There's no one to steal for anymore. The buildings have been burnt down, destroyed. And so because this first reported instance happened at the town of Forge, it's sort of given this name of forging. And so the Red Ship Raiders, when they come into a town and they do this sort of hostage deal and return people in this sort of, dehumanized state, it's referred to as people being forged. Now, the Duchy of Bucktown is doing its best to protect its coastal towns and its surrounding cities by protecting them against the Red Ship Raiders. King Shrewd is sort of shown to be this character who is not really doing all that much. He's sort of sitting there, and he's sort of shown to be this character who he sort of lets other people do things for him, and he's not putting the town's money where it should be going, to ships, to soldiers, to mercenaries, to people that are going to defend these coastal towns from the Red Ship Raiders, from the forgings, and stop this slow invasion and this slow takeover of the eastern side of the Six Duchies. And so this brings us into the second magic system of this book, which is called the Skill. And so the Skill is basically another form of telekinesis, but sort of human to human. And it's a more well-known power that's has been used sort of primarily in the royal family. And so it's sort of seen to be a far-seer ability. And so throughout history, it's been used under each rule in different ways. And sort of some of the previous rulers decided to wipe it out. They stopped training people in how to use it. But King Shrewd thought that he needs to bring it back. He needs to bring the teachings of the Skill back, because he thinks that that's the only way we're going to be able to defeat the Red Ship Raiders. So the Skill is basically when someone who's really well mastered in it can actually sort of close their eyes, and they can actually send messages to other people who have used the Skill. If they're strong enough, they can use the Skill on people who haven't been trained in it. So the idea is that people who are trained in the Skill can send a message to the enemy ships and the enemy captains on the ship, and they can convince them of things that haven't happened. They can say, oh, turning right here is not going to be a good idea for you. Invading this town is not going to be a good idea for you. They can sort of manipulate their minds and convince them on what to do. And so King Shrewd thinks that's how we're going to defeat the Red Ship Raiders and stop them invading. And so eventually, after Fitz is being trained as an assassin, we see the Skill Master Galen come in. And so Galen is actually the town's skill master, the royal skill master. And so he is actually a teacher in the Skill. And he's sort of sent to teach a group of people that have promise. That includes Fitz and some of the other people in the town of Bucktown, to learn how to master the Skill, so they can be sort of forged as an army to defend against the Red Ship Raiders with the Skill. So sort of the latter half of the book, the last sort of third, is sort of Galen training Fitz and this what's referred to as a coterie. And a coterie is sort of this group of people who will end up skilling for the king, and they will sort of be there as king's men and women to skill for him and protect the realm with the Skill. Galen doesn't like Fitz. He doesn't like the fact that he's a bastard. He thinks that he's unable to learn the Skill. He thinks he's unworthy of all these titles that he's been given and all these responsibilities that he's been given. And so towards the end of the book, we actually end up seeing Verity. King Shrewd believes that Verity is in need of a woman. He thinks that he's in need of a queen in waiting to go with the king in waiting, because Verity is next in line. And so Verity has actually taken it upon himself as one of the most skilled people in the Skill to battle with the Red Ship Raiders, and to constantly, day by day, hours and hours and hours, to sort of repel them from invading. Regal isn't really trained in the Skill, and he's sort of shown as this flamboyant character who really likes physical things and tangible items. He loves clothing. He doesn't really care about the kingdom. He sort of wastes money on his flamboyant hats and all these things. And so Regal has actually decided that he's going to choose a wife for Verity, because Verity says he doesn't have time to go and pick a wife. He doesn't have time to go do courtship things. He doesn't have time to go and scout different kingdoms and meet girls to marry, and go to banquets and all these things, because he's too caught up with actually protecting the kingdom. Verity is the only one who's protecting the kingdom right now. So Regal ends up choosing a wife for him and going in his place to get her pledge to come back as the Queen in Waiting. So Fitz is actually charged with going with Regal to the town of Jampe, which is the capital of the Mountain Kingdoms, which is where Regal has found this perfect wife for Verity. And he's actually been charged with going there with the goal of doing an assassination for the benefit of the kingdom and the benefit of this potential marriage. Now, I'm not going to go into who that is, but the king has sort of been manipulated by Regal and by Galen and by all these few different people, and different factions are coming together here, and we're sort of still not really sure where everyone sits. There's a bunch of lies. We're not sure which side is lying to who. Through all of this, Fitz has been told that he has to assassinate someone in Jampe, in the Mountain Kingdoms, for the benefit of this marriage, for the benefit of the kingdom. And he thinks that this is the king's idea. He thinks that he's doing it because he's a king's man. And we find out later that not all is as it seems, and what he's actually about to do may not be what King Shrewd really wants and what he really actually meant to happen. But like I said, we're sort of getting these lies. People are lying to King Shrewd, but we also think that possibly King Shrewd is lying to them, so we don't really know what's going. So we think that, so maybe that's going to be answered more in the following 2 books in this trilogy. But yeah, that's sort of roughly what this book is about. It sort of ends on the note of them coming back from the Mountain Kingdoms. A lot of stuff happens. So I'm going to talk about what makes this book good now, because, my God, a lot happens in the end. And so while we're at that part where we're talking about the end, man. So next up, we're going to talk about what makes this book great. What makes this book good? What makes it work? What really drives the enjoyment of reading this book? So a lot of people would say that the first thing about Robin Hobb is her characters. From what I've heard, that's what a lot of people go to. Now, her characters are great, and I am going to talk about that as one of these things. But the first thing that I want to talk about that makes it great is the plot twists. This is like not even a 400-page book. It's 392 pages. The plot twists are insane. The relations between the characters and how they change, and how Fitz sort of goes from finding friends and sort of creating this family for himself with the animal companions, with Burek, with Chade, with some of the people in the town, is amazing. But how it goes from him being fulfilled with this to him suddenly being completely alone. These things happen to him, and then all of a sudden, these people leave him, and then they come back, and then they leave him, and it's what he goes through is really hard. He goes through some terrible, terrible things, some great loss, but some great gains. And that's sort of one of the huge plot twists, the relationship, the interrelations between the characters, between the royalty, between the town folk, between Fitz as this person in the middle. And so his relationships with the people in the town and the people in the royalty and the people in the Mountain Kingdom, they're always changing. However, the plot twists towards the end, where he's sent on this mission to do this assassination, and the wedding, and like I said before, with the lies, and the people where we're not really sure who they're actually sided with, what faction, what political alliance they're actually fighting for, because we're not really sure about that. It's sort of her writing, we see it constantly change. And the plot twists towards the end are just so insane. I haven't read a book where my mouth is like gobsmacked, where I'm like that for a while, like fully like gobsmacked. So that's definitely a huge thing. I think plot twists in a book are great. A lot of fantasy these days is really predictable. Like, it's good versus evil, sort of, which is great. Good versus evil. Sometimes you need that. It's awesome. But what really drives this book as well, sort of its main themes, it's not good versus evil. It's politics. He's struggling through this world because it's a coming-of-age story at the end of the day. He comes to Bucktown when he's 6 years old, and it doesn't actually specifically say how old he is by the end, but sort of in the middle, when he's being trained as an assassin, he's about 12, 13, 14. So I think a few years go past, so I think he's about 16, 17 towards the end. So it is a coming-of-age story, but he's this person in the middle. He's, because he's a young kid, he thinks that everyone's fighting for good. He, like, when he's being trained as an assassin, he thinks that everyone is fighting for the king. He's in Bucktown. He thinks that everyone in Bucktown is for Bucktown, but that's not true. We have these different political alliances, and so the politics really is superb. It's really brilliant. Finally, I'm going to go with the characters. The characters are so good. Just in the first 392 pages of this trilogy, the Farseer trilogy, I feel like I know all these characters so well. They go through some brutal things. They go through some truly awful things. And because, like, Fitz is an adolescent, because he's growing up, we see how he interprets these different things differently. Like, she really writes him as a growing boy. And so if he's faced with, like, you know, trouble in the town, when he's running about with the characters in the town when he's young, it's not really that big of a deal for him. It's sort of just mischief and stuff. But then when he grows up and he's hanging out with them, particularly there's a character called Molly. And so Molly ends up being this sort of, I think she's sort of the love interest of the story for Fitz. And she's a character that works at the candlery. She makes candles in the town, and her father's an alcoholic. He's a bit of a drunk, a bit abusive. And Fitz sort of ends up being friends with her. And so we see his relationship and how he views her, because she's 2 years older than him, and how he views her not just as like a symbol of like a young man's lust or anything, but he sees her as a woman. So, you know, there is a little bit of like, a bit of lustful characteristics from him, because he's sort of, you know, he's a growing boy, he's a teenager. But then when he gets even older and he's moving, like progressing sort of from that, he sees her as a woman. So we see his sort of slow maturing and how he becomes more mature with how he views the world, how he views women, how he views animals, how he views people that are his superiors. He goes from being sort of really stubborn and sort of like, you can't tell me what to do, to sort of starting to understand what the politics are and how he should be treating people and respecting people. And so the characters are just brilliant. I will actually include the animals in that segment, because they are characters in these books. The animal companions are beautiful. The ability, the wit as a magic system is just such a sweet system. And I know we're going to get a little bit more of the dangers of that in the next two books, because Burek has really talked about how that can be dangerous. But as a young boy who's not really using it too much, you know, he's not seeing the bad sides of it. When he's just talking to these dogs and these puppies and the birds, it sounds cliche, but it's really beautiful and really sweet. So that's another thing that makes this book brilliant, the way she's able to sort of show a human side to these animals. It's interesting, but she can do that. Now, you know, it is important to talk about things that don't work in a book as well, because no book is perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect book. And I don't like talking about the negative things because, like I said, I want this channel to be positive, and I'm not going to be as long on the negative things because, firstly, it's an incredible book, so there's actually not that many. But I do feel like for a fair evaluation and a fair review, I do have to talk about a few things that didn't work. Her characters are great, and we really get to see their minds work and how they churn and how they grow and how they interact with one another. However, her descriptions of characters, at least just in this first book, her physical descriptions of characters, I feel like could be a little bit stronger. As someone whose entry to fantasy sort of mainly was The Lord of the Rings and The Wheel of Time, and we all know there's the joke about The Wheel of Time where Robert Jordan does like to elaborately describe women's dresses and men's clothing in quite elaborate detail. As that was sort of what I came up on, I am used to that. With epic fantasy, I am used to overt and large descriptions. So that would have been something that I would like to see a little bit nicer. I do find it a little bit difficult to picture what a lot of the characters look like. There are sort of rough descriptions of them, but I feel like there could have been a little bit more detail. Like I said, it's a very, very small thing to nitpick on, but I feel like, like I said, make it a fair review. I do have to nitpick, and the things that did stick in my mind as things that could have been better, I want to tell you guys what I felt about that as well. So that's just a little thing. Another thing as well, it does dawdle a little bit. However, because her characters are so strong, when it's not moving, it just feels like slice of life. And I love slice of life. Someone who's really starting to enjoy Stephen King. I really love contemporary fiction, Haruki Murakami. I do like those brief moments where nothing's really happening. It does feel like the slice of life things are sort of the same thing every day. I will say the positives definitely outweigh the negatives in this stance, and I finished it, and it was just the plot twists towards the end were so big, they were so amazing, they were so gripping and so shocking that I was really, really tempted to just pick up, Royal Assassin. I keep getting confused between Assassin's Quest and Royal Assassin, but I was really tempted to pick up Royal Assassin straight away. But to wrap it up there, I'm so glad that I made this decision to jump in to the Farseer trilogy and the Realm of the Elderlings. Robin Hobb is an incredible writer, and especially towards that second half, I could not put it down. So I would recommend this to anyone that is looking for a small fantasy book that opens up to a larger series, sort of as a taste tester, and is really looking for something to draw them in quite easily to a larger world. So that has been my discussion, my review of Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. Go and pick it up if you haven't. Go borrow it from the library. Go pick up a copy at a bookstore, and let me know what you think about it. Come back to this video after you've read it. If you have read it, please let me know what you think about it. Let me know what your favourite parts about it. Let me know what your favourite characters are, your favourite animal companions, because I am just in love with these characters, and I cannot wait to keep going. So I'm going to end things there. As I always like to say to you guys, keep reading and peace out.